Yeah.
Okay, recording started.
She said she never saw her legs.
Share. Okay, so today we're going to start talking about Dinah. Which happens to be this week's parasha, which I explained earlier is I'm going to be teaching tomorrow morning about this, so I decided to refresh my memory. And here you see Hamor and Shechem asking Jacob for Dinah's hand in marriage. It's the 16th century. The dress is amazing if you look at it. Really unbelievable. The contrast of, look at the costume here of Shechem's father, and look at Jacob surrounded by his sons. And I assume this is his wife and not Dinah, but it's hard to tell. Anyway, interesting picture. Also, since in the background of Me Too, and I think when I taught this last year, we also had it was the beginning of the war, which seems to be never ending, and so I use this as well. And we have this very interesting. I'm going to start with this very interesting poem, and I'm also going to end with this very interesting poem by Rabbi Annie Lewis. This is a picture of her here, and Louise, would you like to read this?
Okay. Now Dinah, the daughter whom Leah had borne to Jacob, went out to see the daughters of the land. Dinah went out to be with the daughters of the land. She found them motionless on desert roads. She found them inside out, parts missing. Dinah went out to be with the daughters of the land. She found them with no words. She found them with lips forever grimaced. She found them with no breath to give life to speech. She found them there, and nobody believed her. Dinah went out to be with the daughters of the land. She found them contorted beyond anything recognizable, and yet ever familiar. Their bodies made battlefields in someone else's name. Dinah went out to be with the daughters of the land. She found them with nails painted, colors and gemstones for a stillborn celebration. Dinah went out to be with the daughters of the land. She found them and washed them with her tears. She poured her love over them, promised to hold them close, never to be silenced, never to be forgotten again.
It's an extremely painful poem.
Yes.
Of course, recalls to us the last year. And I'm not sure exactly when it was written, but I did find it last year and I put it in here. So if we go to the story of Dinah, Dinah's name is mentioned exactly 3 times in the Bible. And each one is in an exit situation. The first time is when she's born, in chapter 30. When after, this is like her last child, Leah's last child, she bore him, Jacob, a daughter and named her Dinah, with no explanation whatsoever, unlike every other child who was born who has a name explained, which is also very interesting. The second time is the story of her rape, when she went out to visit the daughters of the land, and Shechem saw her and took her and lay with her by force. That's the second mention. And the third is in chapter 46, when she's numbered among the descendants of Jacob leaving the land. So, and this time notice that Dinah is Jacob's daughter, right? Here, Dinah is the daughter whom Leah had born to Jacob, right? So there's a slight difference. And she is had survived, all that time. So the first 2 occurrences are marked by Dinah's presence. And the last one is interesting that, it's just a list of people. There's a very interesting artwork done by Richard McBee, whose work I really like a lot. And so he has, in the story of Asnat, who, if you remember, ends up being married to Joseph, he has the rape of Dinah. And here you have a a brutal rape scene. I mean, nothing is, and in the background is presumably either the innocent, um, Dinah or possibly Asnat, who is born from this marriage. According to the Midrash, there's no mention of her having a child in the Midrash. So here's the actual story. Sue Reese, would you read this?
Sure. Now Dinah, the daughter whom Leah had borne to Jacob, went out to visit the daughters of the land. Shechem, son of Hamor the Hivite, chief of the country, saw her and took her and lay with her by force. Being strongly drawn to Dinah, daughter of Jacob, and in love with the maiden, he spoke to the maiden tenderly.
Stop for 1 minute. I just want to look at the Hebrew. All right. So first he sees her, right? Vayera, right? Then he takes her, vayikach, and very often vayikach is the way women are taken in marriage. By the way, I mean that's the usual word. I mean, this is a rape scene, but very often vayikach is how women are taken, and that's how they become married to whoever they're married in the Bible. And now we have vayishkav ota, which is translated as lay with her by force, but basically means he lay with her, right? And now you have vaya'aneha, and here you have the idea of some sort of torture or some sort of mistreatment. Inui today, the bottom word inui today is torture. But what's really unusual is that afterwards, batidbak nafsho, Dinah bat Yaakov, batidbak. Now, the word batidbak is a word that's associated with a very close relationship, right? It appears even when you should, it's like glue sticking together. It's associated with Adam and Eve, that you should be sticking with the person, with your partner. So it's very strong. And I think based on this Vatidbak Nafsho, I think the book by Anita Diamond about the red tent and that it being a love story, I think she's getting it from this plus the next word, Vayehavet Hanara, Ahava, loves the girl. And then Vayedaber Alev Hanara. Now, Vayedaber Alev Hanara, which is translated as speak to the maiden tenderly. I can give you a whole talk on how that phrase is problematic. I'm not going to do that now. If there's time later, you could ask about that. But basically, I've shown that particular phrase is from someone in power above somebody beneath him in power. Okay, go on, Sue.
And Hamor spoke with them, saying...
Now we skip. We're skipping from 3 to 8.
To 8, okay. And Hamor spoke with them, saying, my son Shechem longs for your daughter. Please give her to him in marriage. Intermarry with us. Give your daughters to us and take our daughters for yourselves. You will dwell among us, and the land will be open before you. Settle, move about, and acquire holdings in it. Then Shechem said to her father and brothers, do me this favor, and I will pay whatever you tell me. Ask of me a bride price ever so high, as well as gifts, and I will pay what you tell me. Only give me the maiden for a wife.
So his intentions are very good, and he's desperate, right? He's desperate. I mean, the father is desperate. He's speaking for his son, who's desperate to get married. He really wants to marry. In other words, he's not disgusted with her after and I say in quotations, the rape. He's not disgusted with her, as is, if you remember the story,
Amnon, yeah.
Amnon and Tamar. The minute he finishes the rape, he chases her out. He doesn't want to have anything to do with her. It's the exact opposite of this particular story. Go on. We skip now from 12 to 18.
Their words pleased Hamor and Hamor's son Shechem, and the youth lost no time in doing the thing, for he wanted Jacob's daughter. All who went out of the gate of his town heeded Hamor and his son Shechem, and all males, all those who went out of the gate of his town were circumcised.
Okay, so the thing, right, doing the thing was, of course, that they all would become circumcised. Okay, go on. On the third day,
On the third day, when they were in pain, Shimon and Levi, two of Jacob's sons, brothers of Dinah, took each his sword, came upon the city unmolested, and slew all the males. They put Hamor and his son Shechem to the sword, took Dinah out of Shechem's house, and went away. The other sons of Jacob came upon the slain and plundered the town because their sister had been defiled. They seized their flocks and herds and asses, all that was inside the town and outside, all their wealth, all their children and their wives, all that was in the houses. They took as captives and booty. Jacob said to Shimon and Levi, "You have brought trouble on me, making me odious among the inhabitants of the land, the Canaanites and the Perizzites. My men are few in number, so that if they unite against me and attack me, I and my house will be destroyed." But they answered, "Should our sister be treated like a whore?"
so in this particular case, they have the last word, and Jacob's main concern is his own safety,
Revenge.
right? He's scared. He's scared. What will be the repercussions of this? He's not exactly condemning them here. Later on, he does in the blessings, but here he's saying, "You're making me odious among the inhabitants." All right. He's not saying what you did was wrong. Usually people think that he did say that, but if you look carefully, he's not saying that. It's you've done that to me, right? Where is Dinah in all of this, right? Where is she? All right, she's not here in the story. She's totally an object in this particular story, and of course, this whole from verses 25 to the end is what I call overkill. In a book written many years ago in 1989, which was called The Tribe of Dinah. Not too much about Dinah in the book, by the way, but it attracted my attention because of the title. And in the introduction to the book, she asked these questions: Did he seduce her? Did he attract her? Did he rape her? Did her soul cleave unto him? In other words, and when the brothers found out, what did she feel? No words, no hints, only what the men felt. His woman, his wife, their sister, their honor sullied. By the way, their daughter, where's his reaction to his daughter being raped? Jacob doesn't react to that. It's only to what has happened to him. He's concerned about himself, right? And there's a lot of, and the question is, do they comfort each other? Do they weep? Do they want something for themselves? And we don't know. We don't know about Dinah. Did she want something from her father? Did she want to get away from her father? Did she want to get away from her brothers? Did she long for her mother? Right? Did she long? Maybe she had some sisters. It seems there were sisters there as well. Okay, so these were all questions that were asked here. So you have your another picture, Tissot, who the picture here does not exactly look like a seduction because it's almost, it's I don't want to say humorous, but I mean it's the her holding it's a little staged. Let's put it that way. The whole thing looks a little staged in this particular picture. But what I'd like to talk about is the whole idea of the rape myth in connection with the story, because when we look at some of the commentary, we see that very often that rape, and even today, you sometimes find that rape is a rape myth. Sorry, is she wanted it, or she deserved it, or it's normative sex, or men cannot control themselves, so they're not responsible. These ideas really are floating around today, and these are what's in this particular article by I don't know how to pronounce his name, Gavi S. Ruitz, I'm not sure how to pronounce his name, which was in the Journal of Jewish Ethics in 2017. He starts by writing that the term rape myth refers to the extra legal factors that played a dominant role, which helped to shape how do we evaluate sexual violence. And until the Me Too movement, people were pretty much getting away with their views of, okay, she used it to get ahead, or that's the way you have to play the game in Hollywood, right? Before the Me Too movement, no one paid that much attention to it. And then all of a sudden, we found out what was going on and we were horrified. So in this article, the continuation of this article, she says that when we look at Genesis 34, we see that Dinah is mostly passive and silent and neutral. A screen which commentators could project their thoughts on and their behaviors that may ascribe that to her, right? Incidentally, there is no word in Hebrew for rape, right? And even though you could translate the word inah as rape, there's arguments among biblical scholars. A very important scholar, Tikva Frivokensky, had definitely said that it does not mean rape. And so the question is, what do you call this if it's not rape, right? But because it is an ambiguous word, it serves the purpose of the analysis, right? So other people can project whatever they think onto the text, right? And when we look at some of the rabbinic points of view, and even some of the pictures that we look at, we can see that they're projecting their points of view. And so we don't really know what the biblical text actually thinks here. We don't know what it thinks about Jacob's action or non-action, right? For instance, when he hears of the rape, he doesn't say anything, right? He waits for the brothers to come, and the brothers who slaughter the town. So we really just don't know what does the narrator think of this. It's presented sort of. And so there are all sorts of different understandings, some which also demonize Shechem and his father. They find little things in the text to support that point of view.
Nomi, do you know when the word onus became the word used for
the word
the rape?
ones actually appears, if you remember, in the Megillah. Megillah, ein ones, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's no enforcing them to stop drinking. When it comes as in modern Hebrew, I'm not sure exactly. I'm not sure. We could do a Google search later.
Okay,
So that's
I'll work on that this week.
Good question. I love this particular picture. An Arab-Israeli artist who finds home inside of a suitcase. If you want to talk about going out, right? Going out. So she's in her suitcase and she would like to go out. So I think this is really a very cool picture to use in connection with Dinah going out. And here is the artist sitting on top of her box. Elliot Horowitz, who actually is the late Elliot Horowitz, who died fairly young, it's a very important medieval scholar. And he wrote an article, one of his best known books is actually about Purim and the violence associated with Purim. And he, basically talks about Genesis 34 and the legacies of biblical violence. So that, and he looks at some of the Protestant theologians, someone like Calvin, for instance, who stressed the danger of unbridled curiosity, right? So if Dinah goes out, right, again, so she's asking for it, right? The danger of giving way to indiscreet curiosity. So, so some of the translations actually, and commentaries later on in the Christian tradition, blame, Dinah's, we'll call it ravishment, if not rape, saying that she shouldn't have gone out. She should have stayed in her mother home. It said he did not abuse her in her mother's tent, but it was rather Jacob's daughter who went upon his ground. In other words, if she goes into his territory, then she's asking for it. He gave the example also of Rabbi Tanhuma, who like Jerome. Jerome was one of the Christian commentators, theologians who lived in the late 4th century. Dinah remained untarnished by sin as long as she remained at home, but that in going out she brought her own ruin. So again, so you have this whole idea. A lot of commentators here who are basically blaming her for her own rape, so that you want to discourage people for going out. Uh, for going out. On the other hand, let me just go back. This was Adon Isaac Abravanel, who was a very, very important commentator. I don't think his work has been translated into English, but it really should be if it hasn't been. And so he says something very interesting that set him apart from all the other commentators, to say how deeply affected are men of merit and honor by any disgrace or dishonor that is brought upon them, to the degree that they would endanger both their own lives as well as those of their wives and children in order to revenge themselves against their enemies. Now, this is a very interesting commentary, because this is sort of a justification of the massacre. And that's actually unusual. A lot of the rabbis are very, very uncomfortable with the overkill that you have here. So he's unusual in the fact that he's justifying the, okay. So, so anyway, and he very, very sensitively ends his article, which is in a book called The Blackwell Companion to Religion and Violence. He says, when discourses unwisely demonstrate that rape is natural and acceptable, right? Or when they minimize, ignore, or silence rape, right? They are actually damaging and stigmatizing and adding to the pain of rape victims, right? Rape victims do not like rabbinic interpretation. They say it's wrong. And some of the midrashim basically demonstrate destructive messages about rape, and additionally wound women who have been raped. So we're going to see a couple of midrashim where you have the rape myth. And even Leah, the mother, is condemned for having a daughter like that. They say, like mother, like daughter. And why? Because when she went out to meet her husband, to have him, sleep with her in Genesis 30, that was an act of, women should not be doing that. They should be lying passively in bed and waiting with their, legs open, waiting to be, have their husbands come to them. But the idea that she went out to meet her husband is a, shanda. So they say, like mother, like daughter. Really, it's a very interesting idea. Okay, people actually go as far as to say in the Midrash that she wanted it, right? That she actually wanted it. Rabbi Judah said they dragged her out and departed. Rabbi Huna observed, when a woman is intimate with an uncircumcised person, she finds it hard to tear herself away. That's really an amazing statement. I mean, I actually wrote here, I think it's I who wrote this, I'm not sure, that it suggests some sexual insecurities on the part of Rabbi Huna, who obviously is circumcised, and he thinks that women will have more enjoyment with uncircumcised men. So you have here a lot of things where women should be kept at home, and a lot of midrashim which point out to that. They should not even go about in the marketplace, all right? And they quote the quotation, which is that God blessed them and God said to them, be fruitful and fill the earth and subdue her, right? And the idea of subduing her, the man subdues the woman and the woman does not subdue the man, right? Notice they say her as opposed to them, right? Which is also very interesting. They actually changed the original verse. So when she went out to the marketplace, she corrupted herself. And so you have a couple of interesting midrashim. So this is the one I mentioned before about Leah going out to meet her husband. And here too, that she brought upon herself her own violation. And here we have, even in the early Jewish interpretation, we see the slaughter of Shechem is justified, that they're acting correctly. And despite all of these negative quotations I gave to you, I think it's very important to point out, in an article I wrote many years ago, which is called Dinah the Daughter, you have here quite a few rabbis who are uncertain whether Dinah was responsible for the act. Right? Because there are those rabbis who thought she was guilty, and there are other rabbis who thought that she accidentally exposed herself and was raped. Right? And I, years ago, brought in the argument from the book of Deuteronomy. I'll bring the text here for you, both in English and Hebrew. Some of you might be familiar with this text, which is that in the case of a virgin who is engaged to someone, if another man comes upon her in town and lies with her, you shall take the two of them out to the gate of that town and stone them to death. Why? Because the girl did not cry for help in the town, and the man because he violated his neighbor's wife. Thus you will sweep away evil from your midst. The assumption is that if a man came upon her in the town, right, by ear, she could have cried out, and someone would have come to save her. Not taking into account that very often people just stand by and watch a crime being committed and don't intervene. But here the assumption is in the Bible that if you're in a city, you can be saved. But if the man comes upon the engaged girl in the open country and the man lies with her by force, only the party who lay with her shall die. But you shall do nothing to the girl. The girl did not incur the death penalty, but this case is like that of one party attacking and murdering another. Came upon her in the open, though the engaged girl cried for help, there was no one to save her. Notice this is the case of an engaged person, right? Engaged person, even though you're not married, but it has the legal status of being married, so that you already belong to someone else. So if a man comes to her and violates her, he's guilty. If she's in the town and she's supposedly going along with it, then she also will be.
Yeah, I find these laws very disgusting because the fact that she's engaged means she's another man's property, and that's why he's being punished. Not because he defiled her. If she wasn't engaged, then he wouldn't pay a price because she wasn't someone else's property. He's not being engaged because he abused a woman, but because he violated another man's property. I find that totally disgusting.
Right, it's very problematic. And by the way, if she's not engaged and he rapes her, then she has to marry.
Yeah, big deal.
Right, that would be a marriage, taking her. Right. So though here it says b'shachavita, so notice the shachavita is the real problem. Taking her, I guess, is not, even though taking her has the idea of the sexual act, right? But it's like a murder here. It's like one party attacking and murdering another, and so only here in the country, in the fields, she would be innocent. Okay. But you're right, it is disgusting. I agree with that. So, so continuing what I wrote many years ago, there are those rabbis who see her as one who accidentally exposed herself to Shechem, like being in the fields. So they have second thoughts about Dinah's fate. So what do? They have her resurfacing. They give closure to her. In one story in the Midrash, she's the mother of Asnat, who's adopted by Potiphar and then marries Joseph, which, by the way, solves two problems. What happened to Dinah? She had a child, and it solves the problem of Joseph marrying a non-Jew, because he's marrying the daughter of Dinah. Then he's marrying in, right?
Yeah, actually, not even just that he's marrying a Jew, but that Ephraim and Manasseh are Jewish because their mother is Jewish.
Exactly. And then there are those who have her turning up as Job's wife, right? And also having her being betrothed to her brother Simon. And there are some very interesting takes on that as well. And the question is, I asked many years ago, one might ask why the second group of rabbis needed to stray so far from the text. And my conjecture then was that these rabbis had misgivings. Perhaps they thought she was innocent and had an uneasy conscience about her faith. By filling in the gaps, the silence of the biblical text, these rabbis accounted for Dinah's whereabouts and destiny after the rape. In doing so, they supplied the tale with closure and, in quotation marks, a happy ending. So here we have the rape of Dinah in some sort of European town. It looks like a town in Italy or any town notice that people are standing by and watching as it's happening, or being forced at knife points, right, not to intervene, right? So that's very interesting. Here we have another one where we have Dinah being carried off. It's not so much a rape, but being carried off. And that's an interesting interpretation, taking her into his house. Here we have another one with the Simon and Levi killing the Shechemites in a 18th century Bible book. And here we have, I couldn't resist this one. This is in Bible Stories for Children, which was serialized in Skeptic magazine. I just couldn't resist this particular one. And so here you have all of the people who have been circumcised. You have this guy collecting I don't know what they would be called, the little pieces of skin. In Hebrew, it's orlah. I don't know what it is in English. Oh, foreskin. Foreskin. Thank you. I just thought of the word. Thank you. Which is a funny word, actually. Four skins, F-O-R-E, the ones at the front, I guess. And here you have, more of a seduction scene, and then this is followed by the brothers coming with their. Notice the medieval fortress here that you have here, and here you have another scene. Okay, so we now come to the story that I wrote many years ago. We have time for that. Let me just see if there's something I want to conclude with afterwards, so that I don't want to miss that. Okay, all right. We could go to my midrash. So for a change, I'm going to have you read my midrash, which I wrote many years ago. A little background to this. First of all, let me see how many readers we have here. One. We have Sue, we have Louise, we have Debbie, Norman, Toby, Lily, Margie, Jerilyn, Janet, Susan. Okay, and the other people, I don't see their faces. So we have enough readers. I'll give you numbers in a minute. But many years ago, I wrote this particular midrash, sort of reflecting my own feelings about something at the university. But it was also the basis for the very first academic paper I ever wrote. And it has a very interesting history of why I wrote an academic paper about Dinah, because there was a conference in Jerusalem that Nina Pelly, I believe, organized, one of very early feminists. And I think she organized it together with Alice Shalvey in, I don't remember the exact year, in the 1980s. It was the first international, and there was never a second, but it was called the first International Conference of Women and Halacha or Judaism or something. I don't remember the exact name. And Penina Pelly asked me would I like to teach. And I said, oh, I would love to teach my midrash that I just wrote about Dinah. She said, oh, no, you can't do that. It has to be scholarly. So she said, why don't you write a scholarly paper and see what the Midrash has to say about Dinah? So I went ahead and I wrote the scholarly paper for that particular conference. So because of this particular Midrash, which I wanted to share at the time, but wasn't allowed to, I ended up really looking into not only Dinah, but in general, began looking into women in the Midrash in general. So this was really very interesting for me in those days. So I'm not sure how many readers we need, so we'll start with Jill 1, Sue 2, Louise 3, remember your numbers, Debbie 4, Norman 5, Toby 6, Lily 7, Margie 8, Geraldine 9, Janet 10, Susan 11. I have no idea how many. I didn't count the pages. We may or may not get to, and some are shorter and longer than the others. And if we need another round, then we'll continue. So, okay.
A daughter in Israel is raped. Naomi Gratz.
You don't
Dina
have
the
to, no, that you don't have to read because you already read. We already read that.
Oh, okay.
Start with this one.
Okay. They are tearing me apart. Will it never end? When I was much younger than I am today, I was raped. I remember how the pain seared through me and how afterwards I could not stop shaking. For months, I was in a constant state of fear that it might happen to me again, and that was when I stopped going out to the fields, for they were no longer safe. I still carefully checked to me that no one suspicious is lurking around when I go out to tend the animals. I wasn't always a coward. Once I was known as Princess Dinah, daughter of Jacob's first wife, Leah. I had 6 adoring brothers who took me with them wherever they went and who confided their secrets to me. I had many friends who visited me, and I in turn visited them. I was daughter, sister, and friend within a short place on the land and in society. In the course of time, a suitable match would be made for me. I would marry, have children, be wife and mother.
One morning, I crossed the mountain pass to spend a few days with the girls in the neighboring village. I had plenty of time to pick some wild flowers, which I did. Shem was out hunting and saw me alone. I had seen him before. I knew who he was. He greeted me. He wasn't afraid. Then suddenly he threw me down and abused me. Against my will, he forced me to lie with him. I screamed and screamed, "Help me, save me, stop, don't do it, leave me alone." But no one heard. Afterwards, he dragged me to his father's home, alleging that he loved me and wanted to marry me. Why did he single me out? I didn't like him. I didn't lead him on. I was just there. And he thought I wanted him after what he did?
Open. Why isn't this open?
Oh.
Wait, it hasn't opened. Oh, I have to open the next one. Sorry. Okay, sorry.
My mother, Leah, came to the town of Shem to persuade me I had no choice but to marry him after he had carried me off. She tried to console me by saying, "It's not the end of the world. He wants to marry you. His father is the chieftain of his clan. You'll be comfortable here. You will learn to live with him and love him." She went on and on. I felt only the throbbing pain inside me and a feeling of shame. "Take what you can get. No one else will want you now. Be happy he still loves you," she said. How could my mother think of marriage? Didn't she remember her own loveless marriage?
I yearn. This is really small. Is there any way to make it any bigger? I'm having trouble with my eyes today. Thank you so much. I yearn for my old way of life, but my innocence had been stolen. The old me no longer existed, and it took an eternity to make peace with the new me. I had become a soiled object, someone to be pitied, to be quickly disposed of in marriage. I was someone who had to be revenged, who was ruined and undesirable, hating my body for its remembrance of what was. My father Jacob was furious. He blamed me. He railed at me. Why were you out in the fields by yourself? He kept probing me. Are you sure you didn't lead him on? He insulted me by insinuating that I was guilty, but when my brothers discussed revenge, he remained conspicuously silent. Why did father blame me? I was as innocent as the virgin land we had settled. He had never warned me about the dangers awaiting young girls. How could he think I would invite anyone to forcibly enter my body?
By the way, I think I should censor the virgin land we had settled because that's imagining there are no people there. So there were plenty of people there. It wasn't a virgin land, but okay.
Nomi, how old was she at this time?
We have no idea. We really would not know. We have no idea. But that's a good question. Okay, who's the next reader?
Norman is next.
Okay, maybe he can't open up. So whoever comes after Norman should read then.
Okay, that's me. After being raped, my body no longer belonged to me. I was examined to see if I had really been penetrated. To ease the burning, the women smeared salve in my innermost recesses. They looked, they probed, they discussed. Although they wailed and commiserated with me, no one understood me. My mother and Shechem wanted to solve everything with marriage. My father was impotent with rage and accusations. My brothers wanted revenge. They all were tearing me apart. My privacy was invaded. I had no place to escape. There was nowhere else to go. No one took my needs into account. I needed to be alone. They wouldn't let it rest. It rankled and festered like an open wound that would not heal. Number 7 is next.
Well, I think we skipped Norman. Norman, do you want to read?
I didn't unmute myself. I'm sorry.
Oh,
Oh, you could read this. Okay.
How ironic, I thought. What a fitting punishment. Mutilate the weapon which ripped me apart. Kill the only person I could marry. Would it make me whole again? Would it erase the memory of the pain? I was young then. I had no power. I let them do what they did. My sentence had been passed. My will to fight was gone. My last act of resistance had been in my cry, "Don't do it." Their plan succeeded. They avenged my honor. It was over for them, but not for me. I lie awake at night. Was it the right thing to do? So many lives lost. For what? And the child that later they tore from my body. What became of her? They said they destroyed her, left her to die. She could have united our two families. Then at least my sacrifice would have had some value. We would have had peace in this wretched land.
I still dream about her. They go about their business as if I am invisible. They talk around me, don't look me in the eye. I no longer exist for them. When I walk out of my tent, there is a sudden silence. The topics are changed. I embarrass them. They are afraid to touch me, to draw near. I register every slight, every nuance of speech. I fear that they are planning some dreadful fate for me. I cringe and hope they will not notice me. Poor Dinah, what will become of her?
I think that's the end. But the next readers, you could continue reading this because I think this is important as well. And then we could discuss the story if you'd like.
Okay, a happy ending. Midrashi, closure, two birds with one stone. What happens to Dinah after the tragic events that have taken place in the city of Shechem? Our text does not say. Dinah exits silently, but a midrash tells that a child was born from the intercourse between Dinah and Shechem, a girl whom the brothers wanted killed in order to cancel the evidence of shame. But old Jacob decided she should be saved. That is how the Midrash tries to recover Jacob's fatherly function. He had a special gold medallion engraved with God's name and fastened it around her neck, then abandoned the child to her fate. Thanks to that gift, the child was protected by their angel Michael, who made her read to Egypt in the house of Potiphar,
Potiphar.
Potiphar, who adopted her and called her, help me,
Asenath.
Asenath, destined to become Joseph's wife. According to this legend, which identifies Dinah's child with Asenath, she saved Joseph's life by whispering to Potiphar that Joseph was innocent and relating the true facts. Sorry.
Okay, so we have here, in addition to my midrash, we have some other things which we haven't discussed yet. And so I think this would be very interesting um, if you'd like to, we have, what time is it? 6:48. We have some time to discuss my midrash and this as well. And then I'll conclude with something which is a little, well, maybe I'll conclude first and then we'll discuss my midrash. Because what comes now is not that long. So here you have an interesting picture which accompanies a blog that appeared in 2020, which uses the phrase from that Jacob says at the end of his days, "Blessed be their anger, for it is strong." Right, and so she actually justifies the act, and this is how she concludes her article. So whoever was supposed to read after Jerry Lynn, continue reading. I have no idea who is supposed to read after you.
Oh, I think it's me. I'm sorry, I didn't unmute. Hannah Tannenbaum concludes her article thus: For Shimon and Levi, it was a time for war. They acted on the courage of their convictions that right should triumph. In history, others have done the same. President Truman, in his decision to drop the atomic bomb, thereby ending the carnage of World War II, or in the early days of the State of Israel, Ariel Sharon and the retaliatory attacks on Arab settlements by his legendary Brigade 101, which quickly quelled the deadly Arab marauders. For all that these instances wrought devastation for some, the motive for them was not the offensive of conquest or vengeance, but defense, deterrence, and lasting peace. Shimon and Levi saw their killing acts as necessary in order to prevent future atrocities. For them, anything less, a more moderate response, would have meant tolerating Shechem's turning their sister Dinah into a harlot.
So this is very a political stance that Hannah Tannenbaum is taking, bringing together, her opinion of what's going on. It said 2020, but it could be for today as well. And here we have somebody who replied to Tannenbaum, which I thought was very interesting. This is what this is. Oh, I guess she was quoting Shimshon Raphael Hirsch. So I guess that's that's the Hirsch that's he's a great Bible commentator from the early 20th century, who was Orthodox, but I would say the beginning of modern Orthodoxy, Shimshon Raphael Hirsch. Do we have another reader here who hasn't read yet?
Yeah, I haven't read, but I think there was somebody else. No? Okay, I'll read. Among other problems here, you misrepresent Hirsch by citing him so selectively. Here's what he said in summarizing why Yaakov cursed them, even decades later. Shimon and Levi would have indeed the right dispositions and feelings for leadership, but the means and ways they adopt are objectionable. Therefore, my will, the will of my nation, may not enter their council, i.e., their decisions may never decide the nation's actions. Their council may never represent the will of the nation. With their gatherings, my honor may never be identified. The national teachings may never rest on their actions. When they advise, my will may never be staked, nor my honor when they act. For their rage was perfectly justified, but in their rage they committed murder. In their rage they killed innocent men. Therefore, they are unfit for leadership. More, as leaders of the nation, they would constitute a danger.
whereas Ruvain had too little self-confidence. In them, the consciousness of their own power and strength was too hot, and where it was a matter of the general welfare, was ruthless, knew no bounds. It is of the most profound importance that here, at once, at laying the foundation of the Jewish nation, a curse is laid on any and every transgression of the laws of morality and justice, even if done in the interest of the public and the state. All other states and nations justify themselves by the principle that public and state interests sanctify everything. Cunning, trickery, and force, which in private life would be punished with prison and gallows, are rewarded with civic honors and medals. The original testament for the Jewish nation lays a curse on all trickery and violence, even if practiced for the most justified cause in the public interest, and perpetuates the teaching that even in public life and in the public interest, not only the end, but the means too must be pure. In no case does the end justify the means.
This is a very, very strong statement. This was an answer to what Tannenbaum wrote in her blog. And
Can you tell us who this guy, who Joshua Shanes is?
I found this in the Times of Israel, the Chana Tannenbaum. I think you could find it in her blog. Right, you have to look for it. Chana.
No, I'm asking about Joshua Shanes.
He's the one who. This must have been a later commentary.
Who is he?
I don't know. I have no idea. But he's quoting Hirsch. He's quoting Simcha Rachamel Hirsch, I think. This is all in quotation marks, right? He says, here's what he said in summarizing why Yaakov cursed them. Right? That's what it looks like to me. I myself am not clear. I have a quotation mark here at the beginning and a quotation mark at the end. I would have to go back to my original notes to find this, but it's a very strong statement. I'm assuming this is Hirsch. I may be wrong. Now, my own conclusion in an article that I wrote a couple of years ago, which appears in the Torah.com, is asking the question, are we left with any readers here? I'll read it. What could have happened if in the story, the brothers had gone along with the marriage proposal? If, for example, Jacob had been a stronger leader who could bring his sons to see things in a different light. Instead, the brothers tricked Jacob as well, and he is left holding his tongue until his deathbed, when he finally lashes out at his sons and curses them for their folly. But imagine a different story. Imagine a Torah that instead of telling about battles and the eventual conquest of the local inhabitants by the Israelites, told us about how the Israelites and the Hivites made peace and lived side by side as neighbors, with most of the locals joining Abraham's religion as converts. It could have been a lasting spiritual coup, one that could have served as a model for succeeding generations, including our own. So this has appeared, it was called the Dinah story, a missed opportunity for intermarriage and conversion, and you can read it on thetorah.com, on their website. So I asked the question also, I saw it as a missed opportunity. And finally, let's end with another poem by Rabbi Annie Lewis. And is there anyone who hasn't read who would like to read? No? Okay. It's called Uprising. Me too, Dinah. Me too. If only you could see us now, all the great men falling like the idols of your great-great-grandfather, egos slain like the men of Shechem. If only you could see us now, your sisters, taught to make nice, take care, shouting, me too, no more. All your sisters trained to harbor shame for going out, claiming space, craving more, because we asked for it, so we deserved it. If only you could see us now, Dinah, our truth rising up like song. I started with her poem and concluded with her poem. And, there's lots of things here to think about and to talk about. Would any of, I see we have only 2 minutes, but we can go over time a few seconds if necessary. And those of you who have to leave, you're forgiven. Okay. Would anyone like to comment on this?
Well, I had a question. Naomi, you're right. It was a missed opportunity for understanding between the two peoples. And yes, that's true. I agree with you, but that still leaves Dinah dealing with the rape and not getting help.
Right, but unless you see the story as um, Anita Diamond, who actually saw it as a love story, right? That
Yeah.
was her interpretation, and there is some room for that because if in general women are in those days taken, right, but whether with the approval of their parents or not, but if they're taking, I mean would lead to marriage, whether it's formal marriage under a chuppah or something like that. We didn't have that in those days. There was basically taking a woman, kach, right? Kach is the word for people getting together, right? I don't even want to use the word marriage because don't really have that. So okay, so that's a good question, Margie. Yes, I agree. And anyone else would like to comment? No comments. Okay, so there's a little politics.
Yes, I wanted to comment. I wanted to comment on the politics. I mean, I think what's going on right now with not with the people who say death to Israel, but with the people who are like me, the very left-wing peacenik Jews who care very much about Israel. I think that the argument is exactly what Seamus wrote about, quoting Hirsch, right? It's about the ends justifying the means, and where do you draw the line between defense and going overboard?
Right, right. It's very problematic, and a lot of people who were left now are middle or even right. I mean, people are very confused. I mean, not only in Israel, in America as well. Nothing is simple, and I think we are allowed to hold two truths at the same time. I think lehefech. I think it's very important that we could see a balance and see that there could be two different sides. Otherwise, there's no possibility of dialogue whatsoever. And actually, since I still haven't gotten to the shloshim of my husband, Michael, he was very involved in interfaith until the very end. He was involved in interfaith, and one of the people speaking at his funeral was the sheikh from our neighboring town, and spoke with very warm terms about my husband and his contribution to interfaith. And if we give up, it's a problem. I mean, I don't think we could give up, even though we're in the middle of. And by the way, what's going on in Syria? Who knows where that's going to? I think at this point, I'm now officially stopping recording. Stop